Hi, so we're back with video assignment number 2. So I'm just going to dive right in. Okay, let's see, I have it pulled up. So describe the interest that you ultimately chose. So we started out with like farmers, where food comes from, gardening, planning, was kind of in the realm of like where we were going. For a month, maybe even more, when I was there, and maybe even before I got there, they had been talking about healthy foods for a really long time. And they would talk about where the food comes from, like who helps keep you healthy, who gives you healthy foods. And I realized that they didn't really know anything about, like farmers had never gotten mentioned. But I did know that they were interested in the foods because they had been playing with them for a month, and anytime you saw free play happening, they were always doing something with like food activities, like whether it was like washing food in the water table or like opening up a shop in the dramatic play center. I'm lucky that my mentor teacher does a really good job of like emergent curriculum, and having a lot of different materials that can be introduced into the classroom to enhance. So I tried it out I think it was on a Friday on week 5 before we started the project, and we did a garden outside, and I was like, let's just see if I'm on the right track. And we brought out a bunch of different stuff, and every kid but 3 of them ended up doing the activity, and I was like, oh, like this is a good experience. Like everybody came in, everybody seems to be interested. And so the next week, to start my project, I was like, okay, I'm going to start with these 4 kids. Like, there's a bunch of diversity. There's 2 boys, there's 2 girls. Some are quiet and shy. Some are like outspoken. So I was really going to test the like imitation and mirroring and like all of those things that we learn about. Then it turned out that the 4 kids that I had originally chose, I think one of them is in the group now. So that quickly changed. So on week 6, I started out with, see if I can pull it up, just like wanted to read a book because I thought that would be the best way to like introduce something, right? Like start at the beginning and work your way up. No, the kids were super not interested in a book. That's good to note because I'm going to talk about a book later, and how I got them interested in books. But we started out reading a book and like talking about where farmers came from. We were also in the middle of class while everybody was doing free play around us, and there were kids playing with Play-Doh and kinetic sand, and the kids in my group were like, I just want to go over there and do that. Even though the center's full, I just want to sit on the floor and like watch them play. And I was like, you know what, that's fine. So we got through a little lesson, let them do whatever, and I was like, man, this is not going to work. So the next day I decided to do something different where when I got in the morning, I set up a sensory bin with like a bunch of different like bird seeds, and like different tools. We had a weigh station and like scoopers and magnifying glasses, microscope, all kinds of stuff. And I just put it on the table, and I was like, I'm just going to see who comes, and whoever comes and like stays the longest, asks the most questions, like those 4 kids are the ones that I'll do. And so I had a group of 4 that came and stayed. They kind of like missed each other a little bit. Like I think 2 of them were in there at the same time. But a lot of the questions were like, what is this? Like these are bird seeds. Can I eat them? Surprisingly. Like every single kid asked if they could eat them. So we like broke them apart, and I was like, sure, they're not going to taste very good because it's like bird seed for birds. And I said, but they do make seeds, like bird seeds, like sunflower seeds. We talked about sunflower seeds. But I was like, they do make sunflower seeds that like humans can eat, and it tastes a lot better than these. Would you guys want to try them? And they were like, yeah. So anyway, that was like day 2 of us doing stuff. And I'm only there 2 days a week, sometimes 3. So that was that. And I was like, okay, I think like, since they weren't super interested in farming, but they're interested in the seeds, like let's start there. And so that was week 6. And so when we moved on to week 7, I was only there for 1 day a week because they happened to be closed for a holiday. But we did 3 different provocations because I wanted to get like like they were interested, but I really wanted to like dive into something and like solidify that for them. So we tasted 3 different kinds of seeds. We did chia, pumpkin, and sunflower seeds, and we like charted a graph on the back, and each kid got to tell us like if they liked them, if they didn't like them, what they noticed about them, like how did they taste, how did they feel, how did they smell. So some kids were like, they're salty, and some kids said that they were sugary, and other kids said they tasted like banana muffins and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so like them specifically, like talking about it before, and us talking about like we eat seeds and like birds eat seeds, other animals eat seeds. So we went into like trying seeds this week. And then the bird seed that we had in the sensory bin, I got sunflower butter. So when we were eating our sunflower seeds and we were talking about it, then when we segued into putting sunflower butter on pine cones to make bird feeders, I was like, yeah, so like these sunflowers turn into this sun butter. And then all the kids are like, can I eat it? Because we were just eating like all the other stuff. And I was like, yeah, you can eat it. And then they were all trying to put it in their mouth. I was like, whoa, 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 like it is edible, but like let's not lick the sunflower butter off of the paintbrush that we're using. And of course, like some of them did. One kid was like licking the table, and it was a little bit chaotic, but kind of funny. But also at the same time, it's like, all right. But anyway, so like each kid had their own cup, or were sharing a cup of like sun butter, and they stick their paintbrush in and like paint it on the pine cone, and then they roll it in the seeds and like toss the bucket around and like flip the seeds on top of the pine cones. And then the next thing that we did, so we did these kind of like back to back. It was just planting some seeds. Like we got peas, morning glories, zinnias, and tomatoes. Seeds, and they each got a pack that had like 4 of those little like biodegradable like carton type things. So they each got to plant seeds in each one of those, but there was a big giant like bucket of soil, so they got to scoop it with spoons in there, and then they got to water it, and then they got to put the seeds in. But that was mostly like something I wanted us to do in case they continue to be interested in plants. We'd have something physically growing in the classroom for them to see. And I graphed the chart from the seed test, or the seed taste test, on the wall, where I took clear tape and put the seeds like stuck to the tape and then taped it on there, so the kids could like physically still see the seeds. Now they had plants growing that they could see every day in the classroom. So trying to add a visual component to what they've learned, so that they're not, you know, I'm only there Monday and Tuesday, so then they have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then they have the weekend, and they have Hannah coming in to do stuff, they have Miss Ann doing stuff, and they have like their parents doing stuff with them on the weekend. So by the time I circle back to me, if they're not actively seeing that and talking about it during the week, they're like, wait, what were we doing again? So yeah, we did those 3 provocations, and it was to like, we hung the bird feeders outside so they could like see that outside. But yeah, so we did that, and I don't know, there's just a lot of conversation about what we could eat. And how like some stuff has seeds and some stuff doesn't have seeds, and like these are kind of weird because like the only thing that they knew had seeds were pumpkins, like we talked about when they carved pumpkins. So the following week I was like, oh man, they're really like digging like food and seeds. So I brought in a bunch of different stuff, like a bunch of vegetables and fruits. And so this would be week 8. And we started out the week I brought in like kid knives and utensils. And we played a game like seed versus no seed. And I laid out all of the like fruits and vegetables, and I'd pick one up and say, okay, like an orange, seed or no seed. And they had a little paddle that had seeds on it with like a big red X or a green check, and they would hold up seed or no seed. And so I had a paddle too, and I'd say, what do we think? Seed or no seed? And they would hold up which one they thought, and I would chart it on the graph, and then we'd let them like cut it open. Like I'd give them the different stuff to cut open, and they would like show their friends, and we would say whether we were right or wrong. And specifically 3 of those things had seeds that you could eat and that I wanted them to try. So we tried pomegranates, we tried edamame, and we tried cucumbers, because like they were like, can I eat this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can eat the apple, you can eat the oranges, like sure. But I really specifically wanted them to like try the edamame or like try the pomegranate seeds, because I know that's not something that they had probably seen before. But also to show them that it's like in stuff that they like like haven't seen. And that we can try different things. And it was so weird because everybody like tried like pretty much everything. But anyway, so then we were moving on. Like we had been talking about how seeds grow ever since like the couple weeks before that, when like we had tried to talk about like farmers and farmers plant seeds. So the whole time we've been like talking about seeds, we've been talking about its life cycle, and we've been talking about how, like what it needs to grow, like sun, and it needs water. And so this week we kind of put that into practice where we read The Tiny Seed by Eric Carle, and then I just got a bunch of collage materials and let them just have at it. And I quickly realized that some of them, I was like, man, like they don't know how to use glue, or they don't know how to use, or they're like hoarding the materials, like, oh, I have to use all, like I have to dump all of them really fast because there's not going to be any, even though there's like bags of it. And then it made me like reflect back, and I was like, whoa, like I've only actually ever seen one of my kids actively, like day to day, visit the art center. And I'm not there when they do it, art activities or art experiences like in the classroom, so I've never really seen them do a lot of art with the kids, like structured, like let's sit down, like let's do stuff. It's always just been like there's some stuff over there. So I'm thinking that like at that point I'm thinking, oh, maybe they don't even know how to use glue. Like they were like, what are these, holding up dot markers, like they had just never used dot markers before. So then that told me like, okay, I want to try to incorporate art in some way, but it can't be the traditional way. Like it can be, but it's gonna be like, okay, let's introduce, like that needs to be in the classroom where like you go sit at the art center and you like bring a kid over and you're like, hey, do you want to like build something with me? You want to make something with me? But like for my sake, I'm like a traditional thing like this, like maybe not, so let's figure out a new creative way. So that was on week 8. And we like read the story, and I was kind of surprised because they, like the first story that we read, like I want to have language and literacy in there, but the first story that we read, they like were not interested. I don't know if it was because it was like nonfiction and they thought it was kind of boring. But this one I read with like a lot of animation, and I think because we had been talking about it more, they were like more focused and interested. So let's go to week 9. Week 9, we actually, I wanted us to recap the story, and a fun way that I could do that was I found a PDF version of the book where it's like the pages were like 2 pages per like sheet of paper. And I printed these off and laminated them, and then I hid them around like the hallway and the STEAM lab and like where we were. And they went and did a scavenger hunt to find the pictures of the book. So we did that first thing. I was like, they're going to look like this. We're going to run around and find them, like see how many you can find. And I specifically hid some like hard ones so that the kids like who naturally found 4 of them, the other kid that had only found like 2, I could give them like hints and they would be able to find them. And so when we got back, they all sat on a little stool, and I was like, okay, like as I read the book, when I open to the page that you have, you're going to come up here and you're going to tape it on here. So I had like chunked pieces of tape like in rows on a table that was flipped sideways. And so they would come up and like stick theirs on there. I had the front cover of the book and the last page of the book, or the back cover? Yeah, back cover of the book already taped on there. So they would just come and tape it. So we were working on like sequencing and like, I don't know, just kind of like recalling our memory from the day before, and like just finding a different way to like read a book and engage them so that we're still like touching on those skills kind of. They had a lot of fun. And then afterwards I had them come up and like tell me about their favorite parts. And so a lot of them were like, I like the flowers, like I like the bird, or I like this part. And every single one of them was like, I like this one where the flower is way bigger than the house, and in this one the flower reaches all the way up to the sun. And so they were talking about like the flower being ginormous. And so I was like, well, how tall do you guys think you are? Like, how many of you would it take to like be taller than a house? So we were just chatting about at that point, like, are real flowers that tall? And they're all like, no. And so to extend off of that day, we got out those like star builder manipulatives that they don't have in the classroom, but they had in the resource room. And we just like played with those. And a lot of them, like I would start making a flower and I'd be like, whoa, like look at this flower that I made. And they'd be like, oh, I'm going to make a flower. So they would add different pieces. And it was kind of cool because Miss Ann had been talking about like, she read like a book about shapes. And so she told the kids like earlier in the morning, she was like, I want you guys, anytime you see a shape, I want you to come and tell me what shape it is and that you found a shape. So they were like, I found a circle shape in like my flower, and I found a triangle shape to build my flower. And then some of them were like, I built like a flower robot and a flower spaceship. But it was cool that they still kind of like stuck with flowers. So that was a way to introduce like a manipulative into a center. So now it's just that manipulative stays out for now, and kids will be playing with them like every day. And it's really cool because they'll build something and they'll come up and like tell me like, oh, look at this flower I built, or like look what I made. And they'll also like get their friends to start doing it, so their friends are learning about flowers like through them. So the stuff that we like, the graphs that we post on the wall, like they'll be like, oh yeah, I made that. Or the flowers that they made from the Eric Carle book the week before, we have them like taped all on the wall. So then and there's like a poster of the plant life cycle, and so they'll come up and like point to it and like tell like all their friends about it. So it's kind of cool because then their friends will be like, wait, which one did I do? And they're like, you didn't do any of them. Which then I feel kind of bad, but so moving on to week 10, we recapped like the tiny seed, and then we traced our bodies on a piece of paper, and we like drew like characteristics, so like faces and like shirt and shoes, and then we taped them up on the wall, and we measured with flowers as like our way to measure, and we would put the flowers and stack them on top of each other and say, oh, Owen is 5 flowers tall and Zoe is 4 flowers tall, to kind of like tie that into the book a little bit. And then we also did like the floor is lava type gross motor game, because I hadn't done anything with gross motor activities yet, and I know that they love playing outside. It's one of their favorite parts of the day. And so like they just like to run around and have that time. So I taped like a bunch of different like parts of a plant to different parts on the floor, or contact paper, like different parts of the floor, but I also did it on chairs and in a tunnel and on these like little mound climber things for them. And I put some on scooters that moved. And so every time it was like counting down, I had a picture and I would hold it up and say, you gotta find a leaf, or you gotta find a stem. And so they had to run around and like find like where it was, so they didn't get trapped in the lava. So that was really fun. They got to do that. And then at the end of it, whoever would get caught in the lava would come up, and they got to pick like the next part of the flower. So it was kind of funny because some of them would be like, I just want to hold up that one. I want to be in the lava. So we did that. Then let's see where I'm at on here. We also did a really cool thing where we deconstructed a flower, because we had been talking about like parts of a plant for a really long time and like plant life cycle and stuff like that. And as we're watching the plants grow in the classroom, it's becoming more evident, right? Of like, oh, like I can see the stem and I can see the leaves, and like, is this one gonna have a flower? Is that one not gonna have a flower, like a petal? And so we deconstructed flowers that I had found from like my neighborhood and my yard and like their school parking lot, and they ripped them apart. And we were just talking about flowers and plants and parts of them, and like where we see flowers, where we see plants. And then we went on to we had contact paper that I had taped to the wall with a sticky side facing the kids, and I evenly kind of like distributed parts of the plant to everybody, and we put them on little stools in front of where their little contact paper was on the wall, and they would go and pick up petals and they would like paste them all on there, and I drew like a vase thing on the bottom, so they got to like make their own artwork. And then we put that in the window of their classroom, so like while they're outside, they're like telling their friends about it and they can see it. So that was really fun too. Another way to like to do art without like it being a traditional art form. So still working on that like creative expression. And then when we moved on to week 11, this past week, we did salt dough tracing as another way to kind of do like art, but also work on fine motor skills and measuring and all that. So part one was like to make the salt dough. So we all like measured things out and added food coloring and poured stuff and like mixed things and got our hands dirty. And then day two, like we used what we had made because that was like a whole 35-minute ordeal. And we used that to like roll out Play-Doh, and you basically trace like these flowers with the different colors, and like you had to pinch off pieces for like the petals and flatten them out. And then I had like a backup thing that I just had a bunch of tools. So like whenever they were like, okay, I'm finished with this, we would just take out the tools, we would cut stuff, and we would chat, and just like talk about different stuff and flowers. And what was cool is because in the tracing sheets they had flowers, but they also had like gloves and pots and the sun and a watering can, but they also had bees and butterflies. And they were like, why are there bees and butterflies? So then we started talking about bees and butterflies. But then, of course, we got stuck on bees because they're all like, bees can sting you and they're so mean. So we just went on to talk about bees for like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of just like conversating about how bees are actually pretty nice, how they're like, we talked about like wasps are a little more like aggressive and likely to sting you. Bees aren't. Like some bees make honey, like all this different stuff. So we talked about for like 15 minutes. And then at the end of the, like not at the end of the day, but when we went inside, I was like typing up something really fast. And one of the kids that was in my group was like, can I see a picture of like a bee? And so I showed her, and then I actually pulled up like bee versus wasp. And then one of the other people in the group came up. And then I was like, well, since we're going all into it, like, I mean, we talked about like the differences between bees and wasps, looked at pictures, looked at like fuzziness versus non-fuzziness. We looked at like, I even demonstrated with like, they had like this like fake grass type thing, and I put two toys in it. I was like, okay, well, if this one's the bee and like this one's you, like the bee will run away from you, and if you keep following it and eventually start messing with it or like swatting at it, like, yeah, it's probably gonna sting you as a way to be like, get back, you're in my space, you're scaring me. I was like, right, because they can't talk the way that we do. And I said, but wasps, if you even go anywhere near them, like they will attack you and skip all the other stuff. And I was like, so bees are more scared of you. And then I told them a story about how I was eating dinner one time, like when we were in Alabama, and there was like a bee crawling in my arm, and he just flew away because we were eating in a garden, and he flew away and like landed on a blueberry bush. So that was on Tuesday. So then on Friday, like I came back in and they were telling me, and Brindley was like, oh, like yesterday a bee landed on my leg and I didn't even get scared and I didn't hit him and he didn't sting me and he was super nice. And I was like, oh, like this sounds a lot like other story. But I was like, oh, well, that's so cool. I told you, like, did it feel weird? And she was like, yeah, it kind of tickled when he was crawling. And then like after she had gone to like play with her friends, her mom was there, and I was like, did a bee land on her? And she was like, yeah. And she was like telling me all this stuff that you guys had like learned about bees, and that she wasn't scared and she wasn't gonna swat at him because then he would sting her, but they're pretty nice. So it was kind of cool, and I was like, oh, okay, like maybe we're gonna get into bees. So later that day on Friday, we were talking about like I had frozen flowers in containers of water. And they were going to like chip at them and like smash them up, break them up to like get the stuff out. And we used like a bunch of different tools. The kids really love the hammers, to say the least. But then we were like, oh, this is kind of hard. And so we went outside and started smashing them into like a million pieces, and then brought them in and worked at chipping them away. And they were like really using teamwork and sharing tools and trying to figure out how to get stuff out. And surprisingly, like they did that for like 25 minutes. And I was like, wow, like they really, really like love, like even though they only got a couple pieces out, they were just like really into it. And I was like, oh, okay, like starting to realize that it might be less about like the provocations and like almost more about like their learning styles. Like, right, like being like kinesthetic. I don't know. So then I was like, I don't know, trying to find, I think I realized that like a few weeks back, but like trying to find more hands-on ways to do learning, right? Like with literacy. Not just sitting and reading a book because they aren't super interested in that, right? Like hiding it around the room, making it an interactive experience. But yeah, so like the flower thing was pretty fun. And I've started planning like after provocation activities because some of them will just finish before the other ones like want to be done. And then I have them like roaming down the hallway and I have to try to pull them back. So I found different ways to like engage them. But we did like flower petals, like loose flower petals that we put in this like air tube and they like shot out everywhere. So yeah, we had just been, I don't know, talking about a bunch of different stuff. We've been talking about plants and flowers and life cycle. And it's weird because all of that is like its own separate thing, but it's also part of the same like ecosystem or the same like, I don't know, like subject. So it's really weird because we kind of can ping pong between stuff and reference back to things. And it's really nice to see like kind of how everything progresses. But yeah, so like that's where we're at right now. Let me go in here and see this. So describe the interest we chose, talk about how it unfolds. That's how it kind of unfolds. And then so in the video, you can actually see us making salt dough. It's going to be weird when you listen to it because there's people doing like therapies, like pretty much next to us and teachers walking down the hall and parents dropping off. It just kind of happens to be like during that time of day. But yeah, you can see them like doing stuff like dumping, pouring, measuring, scooping. You can hear us like just talking about different stuff as they go along. The only thing I struggled with this one was that it kind of felt a lot more like product versus process. But I don't really know, like when you have something where it's like it has to be so concrete to then tie into something else, like with measurements and stuff. I mean, I guess we could have just over measured and done whatever and then like I fixed it later, or schedule in like an hour of time to like go through the process of like messing it up and being like, ooh, this is not the consistency we want, let's keep adding stuff. But time restraints, they had like chapel that they had to go to, and I just didn't want them like missing that kind of stuff. So anyway, we were like, or they were doing, it was their outside time. Sorry, I try to do an activity with them or a provocation with them. It's like it kind of cuts into their AM snack time and like a little bit into outside time. Like as we're coming in the class, the kids are heading outside. So then my kids are eating snack and then going outside. And so I try not to cut into outside time as much as possible. Just because I want them to still have that time. But yeah, so you can see them like experimenting with different stuff and like pouring and dumping and scooping. So what will we do next? I think we're going to kind of like branch into bees a little bit to see if they take a strong interest. Like it could just be something they were interested in because it got brought up. But the fact that they've mentioned it multiple times and they've seemed excited about it, we're going to test it out a little bit, I think, in relation to like flowers, like maybe like introductory of like, these are bees, this is what they do kind of stuff. And then like, this is how they help flowers and yada, yada. But yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of where we're at. I'm sure you'll be able to see where we ended up next video.